Intercultural here at the Center for African Studies. My name is Joelle Cabrita. I'm the faculty director. And it's a great delight to introduce our speaker for today, Bolu Owoeye, who is a researcher as well as program coordinator at the Center for African Studies. Her work focuses on intercultural communication, which we'll be hearing about today, engagement with African diaspora, and the creation of academic programs centered on African perspectives. Before joining the CAS, she taught professional communication and public engagement at the University of Nevada, Reno, and has previously led stakeholder communications across African financial institutions at Nigeria's interbank subsidy system. Bolu holds a master's in organizational strategic communication, and she brings a passion for connecting with the community and practice to strengthen African scholarship at Stanford. And I just want to say on a personal note how very grateful we are to Bolu for all she's done since she started in the role. And we're really excited to hear more about the research. So the format for those of you who are new is that Bolu will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes formal Q&A, we'll end at 1 on the dot. There is like food and drinks in the slides. Please look this up. Over to you, Bolu. Hey.
Hello, everybody. Please give me a second. So welcome to my talk today. Focusing on my current or my past, the last research I worked on for my graduate program, and it was I studied global teams and organizations, and I looked at how cultural teams in global organizations that have teams residing in multiple countries, I studied how they relate with one another in terms of communication and how technology plays a huge role in that communication. So the title of my presentation today is Between Culture and Code. I had initially planned some quizzes for you, but technology-wise, as we have today, would not permit that. So I would ask a quick question, which is, what do you think, or what would you call the term professionalism? I ask this question because that is like the core of the finding of my research, the term professionalism and global remote teams. What we deem as professionalism and in-person teams and face-to-face teams actually differs from what it is when people from different cultures come together. So I'll take you with me, come with me, and for my study today, I'm going to show you from the back forward. So we're going to go a little bit around the place. I promise you, you're going to get what I'm saying. So why study digital work now? Even though many organizations in the US have gone back to in-person office hours, we still have organizations who have outsourced most of their facilities, most of their services to international workers. How many of you call your customer care service and you're speaking to someone who is not in the US? Yes, that is some kind of things, and many organizations do it because of the variety of options they have outside of the US or outside of their country. Others do it because you're able to get labor for cheaper without having to pay for immigration fees or visa sponsorship. That way, they're still able to use standard and world-class talents, but in their localities without disrupting the lives of their staff. So, and also another reason why I decided to do digital work was because communication norms is treated as universal, and I'll explain that along the line. And finally, inequality persists in subtle ways. I mean, in-person When we're in the office, we can address inequality when you see it, there are rules and regulations, but when you join a remote team, you will find out that there are really no rules to engagement when there are cultural imbalances and whose power wins and whose power doesn't. So if digital work is neutral, that is remote work, if it's neutral, why do some workers adapt more than others? And this is the conceptual framework for my research, which basically was saying between culture, technology, and power, which wins, and how do these three interrelate with each other in global teams. And culture shapes, one thing I want you to know is culture shapes communication norms, either we agree or not, and I'll give you vivid examples. And then technology mediates the interaction, and power determines whose norms dominate in the workplace, especially in remote workplaces. When you work in a place like Stanford, you hear, you see and you feel everyone, there is no power domination. You would say it. But when you go to a remote team, you find out that there are subtle power dominations that come to play in daily interactions between team members or between supervisors and team members. So we will walk through that and see how power dominates, how communication, how culture shapes communication norms, and how technology does the mediation in between. And why did I focus on Nigerian women? Initially, I wanted to study West African women, but because I am in the US, and at the time of the research, I was in the US, it was difficult to find a suitable time that works for everybody because of the time differences. I had about 80-something participants register to participate, but by the time we started, this time doesn't work, can we work for something else? Finding a balance that works for everybody was really hard. So we had to streamline to the number of people we had for this. And why did I choose Nigerian women was because I had easy access to them, one, and two, they had, I wanted to start from a small sect and then move into a broader sect, which is currently we have an increasing number of remote workers in Nigeria, people who now, especially women, who have suffered ill treatment in Nigerian workplaces and have now found solace in international remote roles. Many of them have gone ahead to take on technical trainings and trainings in different technical skills so that they're able to meet up with the international recruiting job demands. And also, they have navigated different layers of expectations. In the next slide, I'm going to share with you something about the Nigerian workplace, also from my experience. And you will see that even though there are laws that protect women in the workspace, there are culture dominantly controls what happens in the Nigerian workplace. The Nigerian workplace is reported to highly be influenced by patriarchy. When I greet someone in Nigeria that is older than me, you have to use sir or ma. If you don't, they see it as being rude, and then they can retaliate. No one can hold them responsible for retaliating against you. Now, for instance, in Nigeria, when you see an elderly person, a grown woman, either she has kids or not, it's okay if you have kids to call her grandma. They smile at you and say, oh, you respect your elders. You can't do the same in another culture. Either they have kids or not, they tell you your kids are not mine, I'm not your grandmother, let's set the boundaries. So that's the same way, this same culture has seeped into the Nigerian workplace, whereby women are seen as the one who should manage the workplace. Manage in terms of, that it's okay, we can let her manage the administrative part while we go on to do real business. The narrative is changing. However, many women have said that they cannot keep up with that kind of experience. So they have opted to train themselves in technical skills and then shift over to international markets. Now, what does this international markets have for them? It's different because you're coming from a place where you have been battered, bruised, and looked down upon, and you're going to a place that you're being accepted, but your defense is still up. You're coming into a workplace where you see your boss smiling and you're telling yourself, No, that smile is not normal. It doesn't mean she's being nice. It means she's setting a trap. It means this person, but they are reacting based on past experiences. Some people would say it's PTSD, but from some of the participants, many of their reactions were based on, this is how things were done there. I have to think twice before I do something. So my research design, basically, I did an in-depth interview. I just posed some questions to my participants and allowed them to give extensive information about their experiences. They were Nigerian women who had lived in Nigeria for about 10 years. Either you are in the US, UK, wherever you are in the world, you must have lived in Nigeria for a long amount of time, according to research that has influenced your culture. And then you should be working in remote teams with people outside of Nigeria. And this is the demographic of my workers. They were working with people in United Kingdom, South Africa, Sierra Leone, in different parts of the world. So you would see that I had like one sample each from different parts, and they had relations with all of the people mentioned. And you would see at the left-hand corner, you see the occupation. We had product managers, product design coach, UX designers. Some of them were teaching international teams on how to use different technical tools. So they had extensive interaction with people from other cultures. Now, these are some of the excerpts that some participants shared. I will try to read as fast as possible, which is there are cultural norms in digital communication, and who determines these norms. One of the experiences they shared was that, my team members were displeased with how I communicated. For instance, I did not know that when you write a text in all caps, it gives a different kind of information. It's like you're shouting or you're screaming. In Nigeria, when you use all caps, it means you want them to notice it faster, or you want them to pay attention to what you're saying. It's necessarily not about shouting. But when you send it to a different culture, it's more like, why are you shouting? The participant was like, I sent the email, and the person responded without even reading the content of the email to say, why are you shouting? And then she had to resend it. Another person said, I'm a Nigerian, and my communications are mostly in the Nigerian way. You have to start a conversation with good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It is more like an unspoken rule in Nigeria. But when you move to another culture, it's hi, hello. And then so I was like, how do you just say hi? You have to say good morning. You see, there are different cultures at play, and it affects how they're relating in workspaces. Another person says, where I come from, we're known to be straightforward. We're known to be straightforward in how we express ourselves. But the people that I have had the opportunity to work with are not exactly like that. If someone is doing something that doesn't make sense to me, I'll be like, okay, why is this project going this way? However, a non-Nigerian will come up with different. They're going to approach it from a gentle parenting perspective. Oh, can you explain to me how you arrived at this? But the first instance is the Nigerian and you goes, what's up? How did this happen? What happened here? So you would see that there are, in cultural teams, especially global teams, they struggle with whose culture do we go with in communication? Do we go with yours? Do we go with mine? However, you will find out that now when they try to bring out, this is how it's done in my culture. If you bring it up what is done in your culture, they get penalized for it. One major thing that came up while I was discussing with participants was everyone thought the same way we reacted in my culture is meant to be universal. Now, when researchers, especially communication researchers, when they hear universality, they're like, oh, it's not new. The new concept in what my research found was that initially, cultural universality is that everybody in all cultures, we have something that is similar. We do something similar. But in this concept, cultural universality is more like, I see my culture as the dominant one, and every other culture should be doing things my way, not your way. And that affects how communication is going, because as the two cultures clash, you find out that those from Nigeria, I mean, if you've ever heard before, you would hear Nigerians call themselves the giant of Africa. And they take pride in that, especially when you go on Twitter and they're having Twitter wars, especially between Ghana and Nigeria. Yes, a lot. So you will find out that Nigerians pride themselves in being the giant of Africa. You will hear some expression like Nigerian will carry last. That's to tell you we have to be at the top of our game every time. However, when they go into these cultural teams, they're faced with the possibility of not being the giants of the team. Now their culture is being sidelined, and they have this conflict of, how am I supposed to, are you telling me it's not normal? I mean, I thought we were giants of Africa. It's meant to be the same way in your culture. So one of them said, they're kind of like informal in the aspect that where you can just say, hi, Susan, hi, Jane. They're expecting, I want my culture, you have to greet the same way I greet. Another person said, has anybody ever changed it for you before? You understand the concept of changing it for someone. So in Nigeria, if I tell you I'll change it for you, it means don't let me manage you. It's a subtle way to get people in check. Now, when one of the participants said I was working in a team and everybody was just lazying around, I told them, I didn't ever change it for you before, I'll change it for you. And then she was expecting them to understand what changing it for someone means. And they're like, what can I do for you? So it's the same way in cultural things. There are conflicts of whose culture should be dominant. My cultural practices, we should already have what is done now. I share these excerpts and these experiences with you to help you understand my conclusions and my findings. Which one is, when faced with all these issues, then Nigerian women now begin to perform professionalism. Like I said earlier at the beginning, it is different from the everyday professionalism. Now, professionalism, everyday stance, is more like you have to be competent or competency is demonstrated. However, it's an ongoing work here where they try to adapt their cultural behaviors to the standard. Who determines the standard is now for the dominant culture in the group. So for instance, we have people from different teams. If we have about 5 people from the same culture and 3 people from different cultures, the dominant communication style will be from the 5 people from the dominant culture. So that affects their conversations, and then all the other minority team members begin to perform. Now, how do they achieve this performation? They use technology. How does technology mediate? I know we use AI a lot, but how many of us use AI outside of, in the workplace, do you use it outside of performing your daily tasks? What do you use it for?
I'm learning Tamil with the help of a teacher at chat.
Oh, that's great. Now, do you use it in your daily communication?
Yeah, I'm probably checking in once a day or a couple of times a day, and then I also get it to write grammar for me and stuff.
Okay, so we'll find out that one of the phrases they use is that you want to ensure that you're keeping up with appearances. So they task themselves with learning from an official teacher to ensure that they are keeping up with appearances. Now, who determines the appearance they're keeping up with? So they decided to use technology, apart from performing their day-to-day task, as a cultural mediator. Now, you hear phrases like, oh, technology has saved me many times, especially ChatGPT. I use it to rephrase my words, because if they tell you you sound very mean, if they tell you you sound too blunt, then you type your message, and one of them says, I'll put it back in ChatGPT to say, can you tone down any harshness in this email? I mean, there is the phrase of, are you okay? When someone asks you, are you okay? It's just basically, are you all right? How are you doing? In Nigeria, when someone asks you, are you okay? It's a subtle way of telling you, is everything all right upstairs? Exactly. So it's a subtle way of telling you. And when someone wants to ask that kind of question in the workplace, they're like, I should not do this. So they try to find like a middle ground. And they're unable to do it by themselves. They now rely on technology to be the middleman. Someone says, I'm direct for Nigerians, but I use AI to translate for foreigners. Majorly because it's not that I'm not speaking English, but the English I'm speaking is not the English you are also speaking. And then you find out there are many aspects to the English. For instance, I write a sentence, and I've also had that experience before where I sent an email and it had to be like, can you explain what this means, what you're trying to pass across, so I don't read something else to it. And I sent it in different places. Another person say, some consider you as direct, intimidating, bullying them, or you're too forward. But you have to rely on ChatGPT to help you adjust your behavior. These are ways that they are performing their professionalism. Now, their professionalism is not dependent on if they are meeting up with their tasks, which they are, but is now dependent on how they are able to effectively communicate in a team with diverse members. Someone actually shared a pain point, which was that she had a supervisor dock her points during appraisal because she would not go on the Zoom group chat and say good morning to all team members. Yeah, she said, I don't understand. How does it make sense? I wake up in the morning, I know what I'm doing, I know my work. Why do I have to go on a group call and say good morning to everybody just so you know I'm working? And the supervisor was like, it's because that's our culture. And she's like, what about my culture? Does that not count? I don't have to wake up in the morning. I mean, if I need something from you, I'll come to your private chat and say good morning and then explain what I need. But if I don't need it, I don't need to say good morning. But then the supervisor was trying to recreate the early morning coffee time that we have to say, you can have this, let's just come together and have a chat. And someone is like, why are they telling me about their tree? I don't want it. I just need to get straight to business. I'm never going to see you, so there's nothing we have to do. But then they're trying to keep conversations alive. Nigeria, despite having a community kind of perspective, we are very individualistic in the sense that we try to keep information to ourselves. For instance, if I'm going somewhere, I'm planning a trip, we try to keep it to ourselves so that we call some people village people. I will not translate that, but just know that we don't want our village people to be aware of our plans. But when you come to a global work setting, then you see people sharing, is it okay? And they're like, I don't think I want to hear it. But if I tell her to shut up, then it's going to seem like I don't want to be a team player. So they have to go back time and time again to AI, artificial intelligence, to help them understand what is going on. Another participant said that sometimes I try not to let my culture interpret for me. I go to ChatGPT and say, this is the email that was sent. What are they trying to say? Just to understand from a neutral perspective. These are experiences that Nigerian women have shared about using technology, not just for their day-to-day habits, but for mediating cultural differences in global communication teams. I intend to go back and then look at how people from other cultures who are relating with Africans might perceive the use of artificial intelligence and technology for workplace communication, just to see how this is the two sides of the story, right? Nigerians have said theirs, what others who might be working with Nigerians or working with people from African countries have to say about technology-mediated communication. Because one of the participants said, whenever I try to speak in the team, whenever we're on Zoom meeting, my coworker just tell me, shut it down. Please type whatever you're saying. Invariably, they can understand what the person is saying because of their accent. And so they feel like, it's either I have to shut down myself and keep whatever I have to say to myself or find a better way to say it just because their culture is dominant. So these are subtle ways that power has seeped into cultural communication in global teams. Now, what are the key insights from my research, from all I've been saying? Majorly is that professionalism is culturally situated. It's not neutral. It's culturally situated. And also AI becomes a form of invisible cultural labor. It becomes a laborer that is unpaid, or sometimes paid when you have a paid immersion that helps to mediate conflict or prevent conflict in global remote teams. And also digital tools both empower and boarding global South workers in the sense that they empower them to attain higher in their professional life. However, it creates a burden on them of trying to meet up with the professional standard of whatever team or whatever culture is in power. And finally, inclusion requires institutional, not individual adaptation. In my research finding, I gave some recommendations to organizations about how they might be able to support their marginalized workers in their global teams. One is adapting the same way, because when you resume to a workplace, you have about 3,000 trainings you have to do, mostly adaptation to workplace culture and the likes. If that can also be done in terms of cultural communication in teams, for instance, the first time someone was sharing with me that the first time they led a team meeting and someone turned on caption, they felt intimidated, they felt bad. But if organizations naturally make it a rule to say either you are speaking in American accent, Australian accent, or Nigerian accent, for your presentations, you should always have your captions on. Now, that takes it a notch higher because it helps to prevent the boarding from being on the individual, and now it's on the institution. So these are the insights to my presentation, and thank you for joining me on this journey. It was an exciting research. I really liked it. Very excited. I hope you're as excited as I am. And thank you for spending your time with me. I will hold back.
So do you want to hold the questions, or do you want to just take them yourself?
Okay. That's fine. I can take your questions. If you have questions for me. Yes.
Thank you, Bolu. That was very interesting. So I suppose my question would be around the gender component, because it was clear to me how the Nigerian women you were interviewing felt that their Nigerian identity was something that had to be really managed and navigated in these online settings. I'm curious how the gender component came into it. How was the fact that they were specifically Nigerian women shaping their interactions with these global digital workplaces?
Just to recap, you want to know how the gender component came in. Majorly focusing on marginalized groups and their communication attitude was what brought in the gender. But in terms of this research, how the gender came to play was more like, I'm coming from a place where I've been battered, bruised in the workplace, and then going into an international workspace. I've already learned to bite before, or to bark before I'm bitten. More like to scare people away. I put on a strong face attitude just to let people know you can't mess with me because of the experiences I've had. So when they have conversations, that is the same thing that affects their conversations. It comes from a gender's perspective, whereby if you went to ask some Nigerian men, they might tell you, oh, because Nigerian men are encouraged to be tough-skinned. There is a saying in my culture that says men don't cry. Just more like you should not cry even if you're feeling pain. They're trying to change the narrative now, but then the idea of when men go into international workspaces, they have the boldness they've been trained with from childhood. Now, when women go into international workspaces, their gender comes into play because they translate everything from the perspective of, are they treating me this way because of my gender? Because that's the same way they were treated when they were in Nigerian workspaces. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. This was really interesting. Things were very good. I have a question about similar to the gender perspective. So you have people feeding in emails and correspondence into ChatGPT, that's then spitting it out in a software way or whatever. I'm assuming ChatGPT is spitting something out that is different people or actually. And so I'm wondering, is there cost to then copying and pasting that and sending it into email, but then you come to gender and congruent? like you're not using as many exclamation points or whatever it is. That like, is there a gender tax on this software that like, yes, aligns culturally, but it doesn't align? I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, so one of the conversations I had with my advisor then was technology is biased. We were intending to look into that, but I wanted to start from a place, because if you were going into that, you had to have some kind of funding to be able to launch into the research. And one thing we found out while we were exploring first the ground was that because the system is built by certain people, it tends to imitate relations of certain people. And then we tested it, for instance, when you type into Google AI, when you start typing, it fills out, it predicts what you want to say or what you're searching for based on what it thinks you should be doing, which is influence. So I have not looked into how their conversations might have been influenced by that portion of AI, but it's something I hope to explore, in the sense that I hope to look at how some of their conversations might have been gender influenced after being imputed in AI. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Fascinating. I want to ask the question by drawing a contrast. You asked us at the beginning if we'd had the experience of encountering someone answering a help call on the telephone from somewhere else in the world. My guess is the answer for everyone is yes. And so it's been a person in Bangalore or Manila or Guatemala or somewhere else.
Yes, please.
But I want to draw the contrast then. I've read several studies of the people in Bangalore who answer the telephone, and they spend a lot of time listening to US television and learning about US customs and mores. And their goal is to say, I need to be able to talk with a Yankees fan and know the names of the players on the Yankees team, and to know that this one is a strong batter, this one is a weak batter. That is, they internalize the process of developing mastery of the communication. Now you present women in Nigeria who are using the computer, they're using AI, they're using ChatGPT as the intermediary. So they're not internalizing, but they're setting up a tool that's between them and whoever they're communicating with. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes.
Well, why is it then that they don't have a strong personal sense of, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to maintain the communication because I understand the other side so well that I know what they expect without needing ChatGPT to tell them.
Thank you for that question. That was a very huge question and a huge debate we had when I did my first presentation, which is, why did they have to change for the other culture?
That's not what I'm asking. I think in both cases, they have to change. And in the Bangalore case, they're internalizing the change process. And they say, I want to manage it by learning about the Yankees.
The scenarios are different. In like the scenario you just mentioned, they are providing a service to Americans. In this other situation, they are working with their colleagues. They're not providing a service, so they are not under obligation to learn to talk like you or learn what you learn. Now, when I am being paid to provide you a service, I have to go the extra mile to ensure that I make you as comfortable as possible and that you can trust me and that we can have a conversation. But when I am working with you, we are colleagues, there is no power tussle here. You know, there is a power tussle when I'm providing a service because it's a customer is king. So you have to do everything to please your customer, of course. But in this situation, they are co-workers. They are working side by side. So it's more like, I don't have to shift for you to take space. There is, pardon me, let's use a lot of Nigerian adage, which says that shift make I sit. More like you move out of the way for me to sit. If you're not powerful, you move out of the way. But they are taking a stance to say, we can both share the space if we both try to learn. Now, for them to be able to share the space with their co-workers, they use AI to help them leverage that. They don't intend to internalize because then it becomes a case of conflict with themselves, where they're trying to find out, who am I? Whose culture am I? I am living in Nigeria, and why am I trying to please a co-worker that is not even thinking about me? But if they were providing services, to which there are people in Nigeria that provide services, and I think that's one aspect I can look into to see basically Nigerians who provide services to people outside the country, and then see how they're able to navigate that scheme. And I can tell you it might be the same thing with the Bangladesh workers who have to internalize some of these aspects of their jobs to ensure that they're getting paid. In this case, they're not getting paid to make the other co-worker feel better. Does that answer your question?
If I can get a quick follow-up, not quite in the sense that both can engage in code shifting. So the people in India are code shifting. They're saying, now I'm serving the customer, and so I code shift. But now I'm talking to my mother, my father, my cousin, my neighbor, so I code shift.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm kind of asking, why aren't the Nigerians doing the same thing?
Because then it means they are going out of their way. It's a mutual behavior. If I see someone who, for instance, I was in a class once and I said something and my professor looked at me and someone else had to translate what I said to my professor. Now, my professor realized what happened, and after that, they had to start learning about me, my culture, just having conversations. You want to go for a chat. Now, you see that with my professor, I started also learning how to converse with him better in class because I see an effort from him, but not from someone who shuts me down and say, that's not how you do it. Because when you are in global teams, because people feel no one can hold them responsible, there are power tussles, which is, for instance, why would you be on a Zoom call and someone else in the team wants to talk and you say, just type whatever you're saying, you won't understand either ways. Now, why would you expect that person would ever want to try to learn? It's more like, I put up a defense. If you cannot understand me, then go learn. It's a power tussle. What culture dominates? What culture might win? But then the reason Nigerian women should not be taxed with the ones to internalize is because it's a fair playing ground. You have people from different cultures. The same way you expect them to internalize, would you expect people from other cultures to internalize? Because when one person, it doesn't mean that Nigerian women are the only minority groups there. They are just one out of others. If there are 10 people in the team and we have 5 people from a major group and the other 5 people are from different cultures, then that means that you're telling all the other 5 persons to go and start learning to please the 5 big people on the team and beating down the other 5 people. That's just another issue that would come up. So that's the situation. Does that answer that now?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really curious how all this copying of ChatGPT is like interpreted by the coworkers, right? Like from the Canadians and stuff. Because yes, ChatGPT has more of the biases from like, it sounds more like a white male Canadian than anyone else. But mostly ChatGPT does sound like ChatGPT. So it's like very transparent. It's like, okay, like you know the questions of the authenticity.
So majorly, I would say ChatGPT just helps you get the message out there. There are some messages, if your conversation is related with ChatGPT, when someone sends an email, you'll be like, oh yeah, that was written by ChatGPT. You can't tell, even when there are no hyphens and the likes. So sometimes I believe they might have trained themselves to edit information after it is being sent. After they receive it from ChatGPT, they try to put some form of, and you can even go back to ChatGPT to say, make this sound more like me.
Did they do that?
You can do it. You can do it with ChatGPT. So depending on however they do it, they still refer to technology to help as the mediator, the cultural mediator in their teams. Please, before I go on, I have a question I have a comment from online. It says, are spaces being created for foreigners to understand African women, their identities, and the perspectives they bring? Well, I will say I've not seen that, and that's one of my recommendations, to say that organizations, that's shifting the burden from the individual to the organization, to help organizations actually make majority teams and majority cultural members understand perspectives of not just African women, but minority culture. You find out that when let's say an American joins a global team and they are the American in that team, that makes them a minority culture, and that might affect them. because then they now have to try to live up to, because I can assure you, if you have majority Nigerians in the group, a remote group, and some minority group members, the power also will be the same. Because I use Nigerians as my respondents this time around doesn't mean that they are the only ones who suffer. If Americans were to be the minority of the group and Nigerians were to be the majority, I can tell you it's not going to be the same. It's going to be the same story in the sense of how do we help our American friends to maintain their identity in a global team? Because if you know people like, oh, you're welcome to the team. We know they carry last. We don't take last space. So they will always try to push some Nigerian. And I can tell you, Nigerians will tell you this is how, the same way I am pushing some Nigerian adage at you and say it's the same way you put it in conversations. And some people will go as far as saying you need to learn some Nigerianness. When you learn some Nigerianness, you'll become tough. That's our everyday conversations. We don't see it as being various companies. Yes, please, Lalita.
So I work in India, and so I'm wondering, and this is going back a little bit to your question about Bangalore. I'm wondering where white supremacy comes into this and the kind of colonial mindset, because if I go into a meeting with 20 Indians, people from India, and I'm the only white person, I'm clearly in the minority. If that meeting's supposed to start at 9 a.m., it will start at 9 a.m. because that's considered the professional. So when you asked your first question was professional, I thought that's dominant white culture who's pushed this idea of timekeeping, for instance. And so I'm not you talk about numbers,
yes,
but I think there's more to it, but perhaps not in Nigeria. So I'm very curious, because I think in Bangalore, yes, you're right, they're trying to get customers to pay off their credit cards or sell stuff or whatever. So it's a different dynamic.
Yes.
But there's also an internalization that white culture is actually better than Indian culture. And that's obviously not something that is correct. But I think in the kind of corporate workspace where there's an aspirationality towards internationalism, that's very much the idea that is pushed. If you want to be professional, you have to wear Western clothes and be on time and do with cutlery, whatever, all these ideas that are out there, that are essentially colonial white supremacist ideas. And I'm not hearing that from the Nigerian case. So can you speak to that?
So in terms of professionalism, that was why I said professionalism in this sense is different from the everyday professionalism. Now they're trying to meet up with a different measure of professionalism. If we start this conversation, we might not end today.
And with nothing.
Because majorly it's more like there is also the white supremacy part. It doesn't have to be American. Once they see white people, some people just, oh, this person, we have a name for white people in my country. And once we see them, we call them that name. We try to treat them like, but then we are growing, we are expanding. And you see, so the first encounter I had was when I worked at Nigerian Interbank Settlement System, we had a boss who came in and said, you're not allowed to wear, you're allowed to, but you don't have to wear English attire to work. You can come to work in corporate native attires. And that went viral. It was beautiful. You see people, and that started shifting things in different workspaces. They now allow you to come to work on a Friday. People now tailor traditional attires for professional wears. So you see that mindset is changing, but I have not explored the aspects of the white supremacist thing influencing professionalism, and especially in global teams. That would be a huge pull.
All right, we'll talk more about that.
Thank you. Any other question?
I had a small question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love to see it. The interaction between culture. How much is dependent on specific fields? Have you seen, for example, women working in a specific industry having a little more trouble since the expectations that come from them? Thinking about consultancy and thinking about.
Thank you for that question. That was not assessed at all. What was assessed was what I found that some white cultures that had more straightforward approach were harsher than other white cultures that had the gentle parenting approach. I don't know if that explains something. For instance, I didn't look at if it was their experiences was field-based. I didn't see if it affected more people in a particular field than another field. What I just looked at was how their conversations related with people from other culturally based. Looking at field-based, that would be a different thing. I could go back to my data sets to see if I can pull some things from there, but as it stands, I did not look based on the field. I was just looking at their communication culturally.
So the reason I asked that, and I think that's really important. The reason I asked that is that if you look at culture, you also have this layer of practice. Right? So everyday practice, unquestioned things that we do, speaking our own language, dressing up the way we want, and suddenly comes in a field with its own rules and its own ways of being exercised. So you don't dress that way, you speak this way. People become, suddenly there's a question now, but there was never a question before.
Yes.
Question things that we've been doing. And I just ask, is there also a component of this human agency where women are doing using ChatGPT, but it's an act of power. It's like, I'm here coping with you, so you feel for this. Right? So I am not using this as a defense, I'm using it as an offense because I have to be out here. And there's more to culture than just the language. There's also the way of bringing ideas. So I'm here, and I'll adapt to this one, but I'm overly present in other.
That's a different perspective.
Well, I'm just inspired by your work.
Yes, thank you. That's an entirely different perspective. And I'm happy because then I see even bigger than the big picture I was seeing before.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I cannot say, but I'm gonna put it in my pipeline. There are a lot of things in my pipeline to see how different fields relate culturally. It might be a little different in remote teams, but definitely there is still some form of research that can be done in that area. And I will include it in my pipeline. Thank you very much. Okay.
No one else has a question.
Anything online?
Oh, yes. One last question online. How are we challenging the broader foreign world to recognize and understand our experiences and perspectives? I think this is one of the ways I'm challenging the broader world. This is one of the ways I'm challenging the broader world and foreign world to understand me as an African woman's perspectives. Because sometimes if I'm not in a remote team, it is easier to correct interactions. It is easier to correct behaviors. But in remote teams, I might not be able to do it because I am not in a remote team right now. But I am giving this research is some form of way that I'm challenging broader perspectives in terms of me providing suggestions to organizations on how they might be able to mediate taking the burden away from the individual and taking it up at the institutional level to ensure that all workers get as much visibility as possible. And the first way, like I mentioned earlier, is the use of transcript in all in all meetings. Because they are in remote teams, they're going to be having Zoom meetings. Now, using transcripts helps a lot because we have someone here that's a student with CAS, a graduate student that is working on training AI to understand Yoruba language. She is working from the computer science team, I think computer science or technology, and she has a website that is training AI to speak African, to understand African languages such that I don't have to try to speak English and understand African accents, such that I don't have to try to sound like someone else, speak myself, and artificial intelligence will translate it word for word. Because sometimes when you do translations, you find out you said something and artificial intelligence is typing out something else and you're looking at where did that come from? So those are different ways that we are changing the broader, we are challenging the broader perspective on how they might be aware of minority culture and just include them in the growth. Yes, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I know I came in late, so I'm sure I missed a lot, a lot of your presentation. But yeah, while the global is important, right? I'm just very much interested in what do you think about the local as well? In terms of how ChatGPT is also or has become a useful tool for intracultural, relationship, like the Yoruba ethnic group, the Igbo ethnic group, and whatnot, in a workspace where you have all these different, ethnic nationality, how are they using ChatGPT to probably better understand each other, or the processes of their work? I don't know if that's something you're looking into. So that's one. Second, I'm also interested in your I think I met you talking about women and which of course it's a very important topic, but I'm also what about women that also came from different ethnic group, the sort of their personalities also shaped by, so just kind of thinking of probably not flattening the uniqueness in their characteristics, but also thinking through how to each different women from different ethnic group, how to start how do they do the Igbo women relate at the global stage different from the Yoruba women, and so what are these nuances to these ethnic differences. Then the third question.
Let me quickly answer your second question, which is majorly, I had across the three major ethnic groups I had as my participants, and it would interest you to know that the lady who wanted to change it to someone else is an Igbo woman. And in the sense that their behavior was dependent on how they were brought up, rather than their ethnic group. Even if they were in a minority ethnic group and they had parents who taught them to be fearless, their relation was different from someone else whose parents taught them to be submissive. Because someone was scared that, oh, I didn't use SAR in an email and I had to go back to go and type, oh, I'm so sorry, SAR. And then they say, oh, that's so cute. She's like, it's okay. Now that is a different perspective, because that person must have been beaten down to, you have to respect your adults, as opposed to the other person who was like, oh, you would understand a little more. The Nigerian family structure is more like the traditional one is the father, then the children go through the mother to the father. The dynamic is changing now. So in that kind of a situation, someone who was brought up to be submissive, to be fragile, I would not say fragile, but I'm trying to find the right word to use. If that person goes into a global space, it's different. So I would not say it's ethnicity that determines how they converse. Yes, that has an influence, but how they were brought up also influences their conversations. So that's why I didn't bother highlighting the ethnic variations of my respondents, because I didn't want it to be, because this ethnic, they bring up their kids this way. I realized it's based on the exposure of the parent and also the exposure of the person that is going into the international workspace. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think my last question is just more really about AI development on the African continent. And the major players right now, you think about Nigeria, you see Flutterwave, you see, and then they are majorly male, dominated. So what do you think about this gender, thing when it comes to AI development on the African continent?
Yes, I need to give a shout out to the organization that helped me. They are called Moms Who Code, and they are dedicated to training women for free in different technical skills. And we have so many organizations like that. So many organizations that I partner with, but Moms Who Code was the majority. They pushed it out on all their social media platforms to all their news feeds to let them, we need to have our voices out. Now, they offer about 3 trainings per year to women, because you have to go in cohorts, to women who want to learn different technical skills, ranging from virtual assistants all the way up to a coder. So, and it's free. opportunities are coming up. Women are being trained in different technical positions, and you will find out one of my respondents actually teaches non-Nigerians and majorly people from Europe, teaches them on technical skills and how to acquire technical skills and use different technical tools. So you will find that even though it is male dominated, spring is coming up. That is the best definition, because this organization, the World Bank sponsored some organizations also that I have, but I don't have the figures here, and they are majorly focused on the north. The northern Nigerian has a high number of uneducated women in Nigeria, and then they focus from childhood to train girls just to be able to use computers and then sponsor their education. But the problem is now they're focusing on science, on STEM skills, and then they're wondering, does it mean humanities don't get a shot? But that was an enlightenment. Okay, I think my time is up. Thank you so much for listening. I'm supposed to bow now. Go for it. Of course, that's fine.
Authenticity question, yes.
Authenticity.